Sister Rosetta Tharpe was born Rosie Etta Atkins in 1915 in Cotton Plant, Arkansas. Both of her parents, Katie Bell Newpin and Willis Atkins, were singers. Katie Bell also played the mandolin. Willis Atkins was not involved in her life, even so her mother's influence alone set Tharpe on the path of becoming a performer. Alongside her work as a cotton picker, Katie Bell was also a deaconess missionary and a woman speaker for the Church of God in Christ. This made the church radical for its encouragement of rhythmic musical experimentation, as well as allowing women to preach and sing in church. Though Tharpe was shy, her involvement in the church gave her the opportunity to both sing and play guitar for audiences at the age of 4. In 1921, Tharpe and her mother moved to the south side of Chicago for a change of scenery. Once she turned 6, the mother and daughter duo began to tour with an evangelist troupe that performed throughout various locations in the South. While still involved with the church, she soon realized that the Christian ideals denounced jazz and blues. Though the church was often progressive, she was taught to look down at genres such as rhythm and blues. Tharpe quickly found common ground between religion and song in her ongoing commitment to regularly perform at church conventions. Tharpe and her mother continued to perform together throughout the 1930s. As she grew older, Tharpe recognized the more attention her performances got, the more of a chance she had to spread her talent, particularly in her favorite genres gospel, jazz, and blues. As her talent got her more attention, Tharpe desired a life that provided a level of celebrity fitting of her talent. Though she did not feel that fame was in direct contradiction to her faith, there were many external conflicting opinions. Dabbling in jazz and blues was frowned upon by some in the Christian community, as many felt it was inappropriate and unbecoming of a Christian woman. Tharpe's exploration of these genres quickly became strained to its impact on her relationship with her mother, who shared similar opinions about jazz and rhythm and blues as other Christians in their community. In 1935, at the age of 19, Tharpe married a Church of God in Christ preacher named Thomas Tharpe. Though her marriage with Thomas would not last, her time in church with him was where she donned her namesake, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. The pair performed radio shows where Thomas preached and Tharpe performed, which only increased the guitarist's popularity. By 1938, the couple was divorced and Tharpe was living in New York City. She then married promoter Falk P. Allen in the early 1940s, though the two ultimately split. Upon her move to the musical metropolis that was New York City, opportunities abounded. Her newfound fame brought opportunities to perform at both the Cotton Club and the Apollo Theater in 1983. Notably, she was the first gospel soloist to play a gig at the Apollo. In 1941, she began to produce her first recorded performances. She was signed to perform with the swing band Lucky Millinder Orchestra. The orchestra was known for its, end quote, churning out danceable pop hits. She toured with Millinder until 1943, recording various hits such as The Lonesome Road, Down by the Riverside, 4 or 5 Times, Shout Sister Shout, and I Want Tall Skinny Papa. Though many of her songs still maintain gospel undertones, she began to face overt backlash from religious groups regarding her music. Tharpe's formative musical experiences in the church undoubtedly impacted her musical stylings, particularly considering that the Church of God in Christ was noted for its, end quote, robust and lively musical expressions of faith. Though her performances were undoubtedly high spirited, the mixed genre elements made some religious listeners call Tharpe a secular artist. Her critics also scrutinized her visiting of nightclubs and performances that featured scantily clad background dancers. Many also called her masterful guitar playing into question, with naysayers implying that she had strayed too far from traditional gender roles. At the peak of her critiques of her music, she was also subject to confines of socio-political conflicts. As described by the Jim Crow Museum, Jim Crow was the name of the racial caste system which operated primarily, but not exclusively, in southern and border states between 1877 and the mid 1960s. Still in place in the 1940s, Jim Crow laws mandated that the racial segregation between communities of color and white communities were in place. As such, even as she performed along with white artists such as the Jordanaires, she was required to sleep on buses and eat her meals outside of restaurants. Eventually, she would come to purchase her own tour bus to combat the exclusions and indignities of segregation. Even so, others remained staunch fans of Sister Rosetta Tharpe and found her prowess as a guitarist impressive rather than appalling. Her unique style combined elements of Delta blues, New Orleans jazz, and gospel music. Though a lack of acceptance from the community that raised her was emotionally challenging for Tharpe, other audiences took feverishly to her music. She rose to the very top with no signs of stopping, becoming a national sensation. Lifelong friend Roxy Moore spoke emphatically to Tharpe's talent, and quote, "She could play a guitar like nobody else you've ever seen. People would flock to see her. Everybody loved her." By 1946, Tharpe was a seasoned performer. Not only did she ooze talent, but she could also be counted on to know talent when she saw it in others, including in gospel singer Marie Knight. While attending a concert at the Golden Gate Ballroom in Harlem, Tharpe heard Knight performed for the first time alongside singer Malia Jackson and took great interest in her. Soon after agreeing, Knight became not only Tharpe's partner in performance, but in life. The two produced a hit song entitled Up Above My Head. They also teamed up on tracks such as Precious Memories, Didn't It Rain, and Beams of Heaven. Each of these called and response songs solidified Tharpe and Knight as one of the top gospel acts of the era. The women made their mark by breaking through to the rhythm and blues charts, which was not typical of the time. While Tharpe's queer identity has not been researched at length, it has been noted that she had relationships with both men and women throughout her life. Additionally, the women were in a committed relationship and supported by other musical artists of the time. The prominence of this partnership, both on a personal and professional level, cannot be understated. Both women toured, collaborated, and performed as two queer black women in a relationship in the late 1940s. It was a radical act. The pairing was widely beneficial overall, though the women would not last as professional nor romantic partners. Tragedy struck in 1940 when Knight's two children passed away due to a house fire. Though a tragedy that brought the women closer, the pair would eventually split in 1950. Between a mix of her religious beliefs, her fame, and racial and gendered constraints at the time, these elements impacted how freely Tharpe was able to live. As such, her continued meshing and bending of genres that laid the foundation for rock and roll allowed her to express herself in ways that were not typical at the time. Music remained a constant, providing her with a reprieve when battling oppressive circumstances. 2 years later, in 1951, Tharpe found companionship with her manager, Russell Morrison. The two set out to get married, with her third and final wedding, that was also doubled as a concert, attracting 25,000 fans. Remaining close, Marie Knight was one of Tharpe's bridesmaids. Though Morrison and Tharpe's relationship was complex, the two remained together until her passing in 1973. 20 years of continued fame meant more milestones. Sister Rosetta Tharpe recorded what is said to be the first interracial duet in the U.S. with singer Red Foley called Have a Little Talk with Jesus. She also recorded various albums with others, featured on various tracks, and toured across the US and Europe. Her discography grew during this time, with notable LPs, Precious Memories, and Singing in My Soul, both produced in 1968. The latter of the two was nominated for an Emmy for Best Soul Gospel Performance. As the years passed, performances began to dwindle as Tharpe lost listeners throughout the 1960s as younger audiences shifted their musical taste to different genres. She pivoted. She moved to England and began to perform in London and Liverpool. In 1957, when interviewed by London's Daily Mirror, Tharpe proclaimed, and quote, "All this new stuff called rock and roll, why, I've been playing that for years now." Years later, in 1970, Tharpe had a stroke and began to struggle from diabetes. Between 1970 and 1973, one of her legs was amputated as a result of health complications. Tharpe passed away on October 9, 1973, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from another stroke. She was 58 years old. Since her passing, other artists such as Elvis Presley, Eric Clapton, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry have cited her as a major influence. In response to his 1986 induction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Chuck Berry was quote saying, "My whole career has been one long Sister Rosetta Tharpe impersonation." A 32-cent stamp honoring Tharpe was produced by the U.S. Postal Service in 1998. In 2007, Tharpe was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame. Later, January 11th was officially designated Sister Rosetta Tharpe Day in Pennsylvania, given how much time Tharpe spent there. In light of discourse surrounding her heavy influence on rock and roll, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017. Media inspired by her life has also been produced, including the 2023 musical entitled Shout Sister Shout, which premiered in 2019 at the Seattle Repertory Theater. The legendary rock and roll legacy of Sister Rosetta Tharpe still lives and hears on to this day.